This video here is about getting to know the MetroX version of RevoScan 5 or RevoScan 5 MetroX edition. It's going to focus more on the software and settings than actual scanning. But right here I am doing a scan to get some scan data into the software just to show you a few things. Go ahead and pause that and we'll start. So when using the software, you have to determine which mode you're going to use, marker scanning or the feature scanning. If your item has a lot of distinct features, then you can use the feature scanning. If you're using any laser mode, then you have to use marker mode. Since here I'm going to be using the marker mode and cross laser. Over here is your scanning parameters. Going to be using cross laser mode, marker tracking. If you do global marker tracking, you'd select this. I have a video on that also. This item is a metallic shiny item, so you select that for the type. If your item's black, then black. If your item's a light color, white or light gray, anything to that, then you select general. This right here is the preset point distance. There's a little notification that tells you what it is. This is just for the preview. This does not affect scanning at all. I'll show you here. If you set it really high and start a new scan, and as you can see, the pixels for the preview are fairly large. That's the only thing that it changes. This can help sometimes on computers that aren't as strong. Since the preview is not constantly updating a very high quality, it can help those computers perform a little bit better. Also, if you plan on scanning something that's flat like a fender or a hood, this is a good mode since you don't have all the little tiny details. But when scanning a small detailed item, it's best to use a smaller point preview. It makes it easier for you to see what you're actually scanning. And as you can see, this is what it looks like. But you'll go ahead and fuse it. And as you can see, with the model fuse, everything comes out fine. So this right here is just for your preview. You can always leave this at the default, or you can drop it down a little bit. But only thing it's affecting is the preview. And if you have a scan that you've already started, and you notice you're missing parts, like the sides and all this, you can go back to the scan and then resume it. As long as you haven't moved the item or the markers, then you can resume the scan. And as you can see, it picks up everything just fine. Just make sure if you do change the point preset, the preview, it's going to use whichever one you started to scan with. So even though I dropped the number back down, it's still going to be scanning at the higher number that I used the first time. On this one here, I used a preview of a 3. We can resume it. It's the same scan, nothing has moved. And as you can see here, this preview is using the smaller points. You can see where it starts to fill in, where it turns from blue to yellow to green. And then you have right here on your side, this is your distance. It's pretty obvious if you're too close to the item or if you're too far from the item. It's good to be between the excellent and the good. Over here is your exposure. You can adjust your exposure depending on the item. You can also adjust your laser brightness. You can also press the M button to use the buttons on the back of the scanner to adjust between them. If yours doesn't show that, then the settings have been changed. Well, the settings for default are different. You can go there, preference, the M key, and you can pick which one you want it. Then save. Now, if you have it as M key, it will no longer zoom. If you still want to zoom, you can push Shift M on the keyboard, and that zooms it in and zooms it out. We have scanning distance over here. This simply is the range of what the scanner will pick up between the distance from the scanner to the item. So anything within this distance is going to be picked up. Anything outside of this distance is going to be ignored. Most of the time, you do not need to adjust this. Sometimes you will. You will adjust this range if you need to be a little bit further away from the item. Now we'll move into processing the scan. So this would be the scan here. And these are the other scans that I did of the other sides. And simply what you want to do is you can fuse it. This one I fused and already trimmed out. And you can set your point distance for fusing. It's possible to go too low, and all that's going to happen is your scan's going to come out with a lot of wrinkly texture because it's over sharp because you simply went too low. The same thing if you go too high, it's going to come out pretty smooth because the points are just too far. A good rule of thumb is keeping it between 1 and 3 for small items. For large items, you do a 0.5 to a 1. A large item would be something like a fender or a door. You can also batch process these by clicking the batch processing. Click the ones you want to process. Click fuse. You have your settings, then click apply. It'll process them, and then once done, we'll continue. Now that it's done, we can go to trimming and processing. I like to use the lasso tool, which is right here. You can also use the keyboard shortcut U. Then I do a rough trim around the item. Then I go over here to invert it, so it selects everything but the item. Then just click the delete key. Now from here, you can use the rotational commands, or you can just press escape, which is normally what I do, and then rotate as normal. Then you want to trim out the other parts that you don't need. Once everything looks pretty good, you can click isolation. I generally do 15%. The number is a factor of the item. 15% means that any items that are floating, that are 15% or smaller than the largest part, are going to get removed. Then click apply. Overlap. I normally just do whatever it's set to. Then I'll go all the way down. Most of the time it doesn't find anything. And go all the way up. Again, most of the time it doesn't find anything. And you want to do the same thing for the other scan. You can run isolation first. It'll show you everything that'll get rid of that's not connected to the main body pretty much. I always run it after because it just saves time. There's no sense in doing it first if you're trimming all that stuff out anyway. For items like this, as you can see, I lifted it up off the table. It's best to scan things that aren't completely flat on the table. Also makes trimming them out easier. I can go right here, hold my point, drag it out, and drag it up, and just have a flat line that cuts everything. Now if you did something like this, where you cut too much of this side out, you have an undo button right here, and you can just undo, and then you can just do what you need to again. And there's still a little bit that's on this base here. You can zoom in and trim whatever else you need to trim out. Then again, I run the isolation. It didn't find anything. And nothing was found there. So now you would go to merging the items together. This is a scan of the right side. This is a scan of the top. And this is a scan of the left side. You can attempt to merge left to right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As you can see, it didn't work. It's simply, there's just not enough data to connect the two together. So what you want to do is merge one of the sides with the top model. And on this one, the top model didn't have enough information, so you can do a manual alignment. Just want to make sure that they're both in the same position, which as you can see from here, it doesn't include this side. So we can actually go back to the feature alignment, remove this side, add this side. Now do it. And as you can see, it picked up because those two sides matched. The other two sides weren't matching the data. Generate model. Now we have the top, the left side, and we need one that has the right. Which is this one here. And we can see if this is enough data to align it with the features. And as you can see, this aligned. We didn't even have to manually align this. That's what I normally talk about a lot on the forums and the Facebook page, is making sure that you have enough overlap between your scans to align them. If you don't have enough overlap, they're not going to merge together. We'll click the Fuse tab. Click this. This is the one that has all three. You run an isolation just to make sure there's no stray points. There's just one there. Overlap is the most important. It's going to remove the overlap data between the scans. As you can see, it's a little there. And the same thing, I run this high and low. Then from there, you can mesh this model. When you come to the quality, you can crank it all the way up, which is going to give you a low grid size. The grid size is just the spacing of the triangles. Going too high, it's not always a good idea to go. It takes longer to process, and most of the time it makes the model too sharp, which gives you a lot of noise data on it. At the same time, going too low for something like this, it's going to make it very blurry, and you're not going to have any sharp edges. A good rule of thumb is to match the grid size to wherever you fuse the model at. So if we go back to the original model, go to the Fuse tab, it tells you right here point distance was 2. So we'll go back to the mesh and we'll look for 2 on the grid size. point to, which looks like it's about 4.9. We can try that and see how that looks. And for this part here, that came out fine. All the data that I need is there. But as you can see, you're left with the little few holes here and there. There's two options of getting those holes filled. You can mesh it while clicking the hole fill. The percentage is the same thing as the fusing. Any hole that is smaller than 30% will get filled. Only thing is some of these holes here are probably going to get filled. We'll check it and see. And as you can see, it didn't fill those in, so that's good. But we'll do without filling them in, just to find out. Okay, so if you did not fill the holes in and you have holes, you can go here to hole fill. By default, it's on plane. What that means is if something is completely flat like this, it's going to fill flat. Most items aren't going to be completely flat from scans, just regardless. It's just how the triangles work. They're not going to be completely solid flat. So curve is normally the best way to go. You click detect. Then from here, you can click the outside that's green to select the hole. It turns red. That means that when you click apply, it'll fill. Or you can click the lasso tool and just kind of draw out what you want filled. It must completely engulf the item that needs to be filled. If you do here, like just half, it's not going to select it. You have to select the entire circle. Then you can click apply. As you can see, it filled it. This hole here, I really don't want filled like that. When I bring it into CAD, I'd rather just have it open. So you can click the undo button. Then we'll detect again. And we'll just fill the holes that I need. Which is really just those two or three. Then from there, the model is done. You can export it here. If you decide to do all models, it's going to export the point cloud and the mesh model, or you can pick the point cloud or mesh, whichever one you're needing. Most people are wanting the mesh model. You select where you're going to save it to. This is on Mac format. Windows is going to be pretty much the same. Just make sure right here we're exporting as mesh, but default is coming out as a point cloud form, a point cloud file format. Make sure to click it, OBJ or STL. If you did accidentally export as point cloud, only thing that's going to be there is point cloud, OBJ, ASC. So make sure you're exporting the correct file type that you want. Then you simply save, and then there you go. The file is out. You can take that into another software and do anything else that you need to do in it. Then let's see. Then we have some display options here. Model property. If you like, you can change the color. You also have a light. Hold on. Light source, which you can move around. Most of that's not really needed. It's just for the previews. Then from there, as I said, you can take the file into your third-party software and do whatever you need to.